Good morning. This is the Innovation Conversation. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing good, Kevin. How are you?
Too bad. Not too
I
bad.
was going to make a joke about my Windows PC and blue screen, but I was actually spared.
Well, Zoom is working. So, with
There we
that.
go.
And I don't know what would have happened if we had been planning to do this last Friday. I have no idea if I didn't have any Zoom scheduled for last Friday. But that's what I wanted to talk about this week because it was clearly a rough weekend because of the CrowdStrike Microsoft meltdown. For a lot of companies, a lot of retailers had issues, not to mention airlines and, you know, government agencies and all sorts of stuff. Um, I wasn't affected, but I'm curious, were you affected at all? Were any of your businesses, did they have problems because of it?
No, we were A-okay all around, fortunately.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're far more technologically savvy than I am. So, can you explain in English exactly what happened? I think I understand it.
I mean, the way that I understand it is there was a CrowdStrike software update, scheduled update to happen last Friday,
Ironically, a
and
security update.
yeah, CrowdStrike is security is a antivirus and security. I think it's antivirus, but it's definitely security software. And one of the components of CrowdStrike is that it's cloud-based, but it has an agent that sits locally on machines. And this was the issue was in a line of code that tripped up the agent in Windows operating environments. I don't even think it was all Windows operating environments. I think it was just a set
Right.
series of Windows operating environments.
Yeah, they kept
And
Microsoft kept saying it was a subset, but it seemed like a really big subset.
I think it was a pretty big subset. Yes.
And it was
Yeah.
like one
And
line, it was like one ampersand or one,
that's all it takes.
it was like
Right.
one font or something, right? It was very
Yeah.
simple.
And it caused the massive conflict with Windows and caused the dreaded blue screen of death.
Ironically, apparently, I mean, and Apple was sort of not celebrating this, but made the point that their systems caught the mistake and fixed it in a way that Microsoft's did not.
Yeah, I heard that, but I don't know how
Yeah.
and what was different. But they definitely leveraged it, and all of my Mac and iOS friends were celebrating for
I
sure.
wasn't celebrating because I would never take pleasure in the pain of others. Well, that's not true. Uh, but and in this case, no, it was just like I felt lucky that that
Yeah,
everything
totally.
worked. But it's interesting because one of the things that became clear, I mean, one of the industries that was enormously impacted was the airline industry. To the point where I know you're flying this week and you're sort of have fingers
Hopefully.
crossed that
Yeah.
things are going to connect and work the way they're supposed to. I had a buddy of mine who was in San Juan, Puerto Rico on Friday on business, and he was trying to get back, and that was a nightmare. Nightmare is not exactly the descriptor he used, but you can imagine.
Yeah.
Um, but then there were other things. Starbucks had enormous problems in terms of mobile orders and then the boards on the in their stores that were telling you what was done and what wasn't done and stuff like that. So
I have a buddy here that runs a portion of IT for a healthcare system,
right.
and they've had to cancel surgeries and other procedures on Friday morning
Yeah, which is
because of it.
crazy. One of the interesting things was so uh, small piece of personal news. One of my sons got engaged last week. And we were doing they were doing a celebration party at her parents' house on Friday, and Mrs. Content Guy had arranged for balloons, massive number of balloons to be delivered between 3 and 5, and they hadn't gotten delivery at 5 after 5. She called up and she said, "Well, there's this whole Microsoft thing. We're hoping we'll get them there. We're sort of lost track of the system," which was again, it's balloons for an engagement. It's not
Yeah.
serious stuff, but still, it was having an impact up and down the line.
Yeah, I mean it's you don't realize how much you rely on these systems until they're taken from you abruptly.
Yeah.
And you know, it does show though that you really do need to have a plan in place,
Right.
right? You need to have, well, first of all, on the front end, you know, you hope that you're going to have the right processes in place to head off these things before they happen.
Right.
But in a case like this, where you know it's an externally managed software that is externally updated, and then
Right.
it impacts you internally, you know that's a tough one. And given the distributed nature of these Windows environments, you know it's often hard or impossible to do like a massive. All right, we're going to reboot everybody's machines for you remotely, you know, and do that. Like it's just not architected that way, so that's tough. But you know, you hope on the front end that you know these are fewer and further between, which they are generally few and far between. But you know how that update got through a reasonable QA process is pretty tough to understand, especially given you know the clear kind of market share of the machines that it affected.
Yeah.
You know, you'd think your test environments would certainly be you know broad enough to include those use cases, right? So you'd hope that the problem won't even happen in the first place. But in the event that it happens to you, you know, as a company that's, you know, has customers, that's serving those customers, that has operations to support that service, um, you know, you can't necessarily fix the problem immediately, but, you know, you definitely would want to have a, like a recovery plan, right? Or a disaster management plan, you know, in place that, you know, when this happens, you know, what do we, you know, how do we respond to customers, employees, and whatnot. And I actually think that that's a question that boards should be asking their management teams, and that you know certainly management teams should be asking themselves as well as you know if something like this happens, you know, going forward, how do we handle it more proactively or as proactively as we reasonably can?
Yeah. Well, and that's really what and rather than bemoaning the events of last week, that's really what I was interested in talking about because, you know, it seems to me that one of the things that businesses, and in this case specifically retailers, don't want to do or should try and figure out a way around is, you know, you don't want to just let your customers, whether they're business B2B customers or B2C customers,
Mhm.
depend on other sources of information. In other words, if you're scheduled to fly out on Delta, you don't want to start finding out that there's problems because you get a CNN alert
Right.
necessarily, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they get to you first, but shortly thereafter, you want to hear from Delta about it. I mean, in the case of Starbucks,
Yeah.
it seems to me they shouldn't wait for, this didn't happen, but they don't want to wait for me to get on my phone and to find out that I can't place a mobile order.
Right.
I want to be able to send an email or a text, and maybe it's the same systems, but then they need redundant systems to running on a Mac to 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 send an email to people. Hey, listen, there's this problem over which we have no control. It's affecting everybody. But just so you know, today you're not going to be able to, they could listen, they could come out and say, today you're not going to be able to place mobile orders. But we're going to put an extra 100 points in everybody's mobile order, all of our frequent shoppers accounts to say, sorry for any inconvenience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And suddenly you've changed the conversation. And to my knowledge, there wasn't a lot of that happening.
Yeah, I think, you know, for the most part, it was, you know, companies would post it on their Twitter
Right.
account or X account. Which, you know, actually there is something to be said for that because I think you do ultimately want your customers to follow you on social media. You know, because it is a platform upon which you can engage your customers. So
Right.
it's a pretty efficient way, you know, if you're Starbucks or one of these affected companies to say, hey, you know, this happened, you're gonna have this issue today, but look in your account for, you know, some goodies. You know, but totally agree that you know the direct touch is always the best, right? So having a customer communication plan, you know, kind of as close to real time as you reasonably can, to address that is a good idea for any business, any business. And I know, like, you know, I fly Delta, Delta did have a couple of different communications that came out, over Friday and over the weekend. And then on the Delta site, and I'm sure on the app too, there's a banner up top saying, if you have to adjust your, travel and you have a fare difference, we're not gonna, we're gonna give you the lower fare through, for travel through July 28th, or, so I think they're doing, what they can, but, yeah, the more proactive, certainly the better.
Yeah. And I think I mean, you said that, these kind of events are few and far between. I don't think companies can count on that. I mean, I think
No,
because
yeah,
I
no,
mean,
you got to be ready.
because this was a keystroke, but next time it could be Russia, China, or North Korea. They've just now they've now seen where there's a vulnerability. So it seems to me companies have to be prepared for this stuff not to happen once in a blue moon, but rather to happen more and more frequently, either because of a mistake, an error, a shutdown of the electric grid, or hostile actors somehow
Yeah.
taking control of the system.
Yes, all while also maintaining the security of their system.
Right.
Right. So at a time when you're kind of knocked off kilter and vulnerable, you do want to certainly engage your customers, as soon as you reasonably can. But you also want to make sure that during that vulnerability, you're not in any way risking, the security of that customer account information as well.
Yeah. I
Because
mean,
that's more important.
sure, absolutely. And it becomes then a differential advantage because not everybody will do what you and I are talking about.
No.
So if
Yeah.
you're the company that gets out there and says, "Hey, here's the problem. Here's what we're doing, doing to fix it. Here's how we want to make it up to you," you suddenly become the business of choice or the vendor of choice,
Yeah.
as opposed to, oh, well, they didn't, they let me twist in the wind, or they let me find
Yeah.
out on Twitter or X or Facebook.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not always, giving you something for free. It's even just communication and just being
Right.
aware.
Right.
I think, again, not to over-index on Delta, it just happened to be, Delta Diamond forever and flying them tomorrow. But they had been promoting for the last few weeks, that something big is landing on July 22nd. To their, I don't know which tiers or whatnot or what customer segments they were sending this campaign to, but they said, keep your eyes open. We're dropping something really big on July 22nd. Well, this morning they sent that note out and they struck through on July 22nd, and they just put soon after it. And they said, that we want to stay focused on helping people, manage their travel and fly safely. And that today's not the right time to be sharing this this great news, but we will be sharing it soon. And I just thought, being aware of that and kind of, being able to change your plan, last minute, which seems pretty obvious, but we know in big companies, when you have a plan set, sometimes you just stay with blinders on, focused on that plan, and you just execute. I think it was pretty smart and savvy, on their part to say, you know what, we're not gonna do it just yet. We're gonna make sure everybody is good, and then we'll share it later.
No,
And to me, that kind of ticked them up a notch, in my
totally,
regard for them.
totally agree. It's situational awareness. And if you're not aware of the situation, you can come across as being tone deaf.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really bad.
Mm-hmm.
That offends that, because then you can offend people, because some poor schmuck is caught in Atlanta, unable to get to Salt Lake City, and suddenly he gets a thing on his phone, which seems like, well, why are they paying attention to this? I can't get to Salt Lake City. I
Exactly.
don't even know. Am I allowed to say schmuck on Morning News Beat? I guess I can. I just did.
Yeah, doesn't seem so bad.
Anyway, well, that's the message, right? It's going to happen again. Be proactive about security, but also think through your plan so you can talk directly to your customers, because
Absolutely.
don't let somebody else, because you want to own the narrative as best you can.
Exactly. 100%.
Good message.
Own the narrative, comfort them, let them know you understand what this means to them, and that you're working your butt off to get it fixed.
There you go. Good message for a July Wednesday. Hey, listen, safe travels, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everyone.